Yep. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are listening, and whatever time you are actually receiving this broadcast. I'm still a lecturer. My name is Adekunle. You're welcome to today's class. Today, we'll be doing this very important course called Supply Chain Management. And of course, we'll be looking at um, what we call supply chain operations. These are what we'll be doing today. And we want us to see how we can cover this, you know, enter this thing with as soon as possible time or finish this course so that uh, we can go. Because right now I am working in the position where there's no NEPA. I'm trying to use my laptop um, battery to work. Of course, I can. Let's see where it will take us to. Then from there, we can, say a goodbye, and of course, I'll find a good time for us to converge and we meet. All right. Um, go without wasting much of our time. Let's look at what we're dealing with: supply chain operations. And when we talk about supply chain operations, we're talking about taking time to see uh, what is supply chain, introduction to supply chain, which is the chapter one. We define supply chain. We saw something like supply chain operation reference model, called SCORE model. We went through different. We looked at the philosophy of supply chain, and that took us to understand supply chain as a service. We looked at supply chain mapping, and of course, I haven't talked about all those aspects of supply chain. We move to chapter two, which is talking about supply chain strategy. Um, where we discuss a lot more about supply chain. But today we're looking at supply chain operations. All right, what are the operations that form the supply chain process as a whole? All right. So what we are saying is that at the end of this course, we should be able to identify um, and cost separate activities within the supply chain. We should be able to understand the role and types of performance indicators within the supply chain, and also understand why an effective supply chain can operate. I mean, how they can operate as part of a marketing mix. Of course, I also look at understanding how supply chain can respond to different customer needs, and also understand the nature and purpose of benchmarking. These are some of the things within the next 1 hour to 30 minutes that we should be rushing at seeing how we can cover in this course if time allows us, and of course if my battery allows us. Of course, when we talk about supply chain management activities, uh, we've been discussing from chapter one, chapter two, um, what supply chain management is, and of course, we look at we realize that supply chain is also management is an area that has recently come to light and has received great attention, a great deal of attention in businesses today, and of course. We can't discuss that, of course, in as much as coming to the market today and realize that no business can be successful without understanding the key issues, the problem and possibility in managing complete supply chain and supply chain management process. We have realized that, we discussed that, and of course, we know that in supply chain there's a concept of what we call competitive networking in within your supply chain, um, where you as a supply chain manager will come to learn how to find it to design, um, to understand how your supply chain design works, and that will enable you as a manager to make decisions on how major investment is done within your organization, and to affect decision on how your supply chain performance is done because of the competitive nature of the supply chain. When I mean competitive nature of the supply chain, you realize that as an organization, um, sometimes depend on the kind of market where they are, you are looking at going externally outside your business to look for getting products from your suppliers. You're looking at getting product from different various suppliers, and of course you're looking at supplying that same product to to a market. So all these come together, and you making the right decision on how you want to impact your supply chain will affect um, greatly what um, your decision will be like, and the investment will be like when it comes to the supply chain. And these decisions can affect, or you find a way how you find a balance within the between efficiency and your supply chain operation responsiveness. And of course, between to strike a balance between your efficiency and responsiveness, there are drivers to that. And these drivers are of supply chain operation are, e.g., you talk about your warehouse, you talk about your depot, you talk about facilities that include warehouse, that include your depot, the distribution centers. You look at your, your stock or inventory level will also become a driver for how efficient or responsive your supply chain will be. Transportation also is a driver to determine, that's the determinant of how your supply chain can be efficient or responsive. Information flow also um, will also play, a vital part to strike a balance between efficiency and responsiveness. So the balance you strike will recognize um, through what we call cost and service trade-off between uh, your supply chain drivers. When I mean trade-off, what are you? What service are you picking over the other? Or what service are you looking at improving over the other? All right, and of course, this is what we're talking about. In order to come up with a complete strategy, there is a need to actually get a driver for you to identify your supply strategy, and your supply strategy will strike a balance between your efficiency and your responsiveness. And of course, those the balance that, the supply chain structure or those facilities like your facilities, your inventory, your transportation, information flow, which are your drivers, will find a way to balance the scale within your supply chain activities. Of course, this is a matter of introduction. So we look at sourcing and supply. Now when we look at some of the activities that are paramount within any supply chain, one of them will include procurement. All right, we'll talk so many of them. We have transportation, we have costing. All right, these are components of supply chain activities. Of course, we talk about even manufacturing, but let's talk about procurement. Of course, from the cost supply chain management, sourcing and procurement that we've been doing, we'll look at, we'll define procurement. And of course, we realize procurement is a process undertaken by organization unit, which either as a function or as a part of an integrated supply chain, which is responsible for both procuring supplies of the right quantity, the right quality, the right time, and the right price of product, and management of supply, thereby contributing to competitive advantage of the entire enterprise, and are also achieving achievement of corporate strategy. Of course, there's a difference between procurement and sourcing. Sourcing is actually a process where you identify, you select, and you develop your supplier. It's actually different from procurement. So procurement is one key activity of that takes place within the supply chain operation. Of course, in understanding procurement, there's a relationship between relationship of procurement to supply chain management. And what are the relationships that exist between them? One of the relationship, if we look at procurement to supply chain management, is the fact that procurement function recognize the need for joint cooperation for both supply chain and procurement. Now, both field work together, supply chain procurement, it will achieve cost reduction, it will achieve improve material delivery, it will achieve shorter cycle time, all right, including product development cycle time. It will achieve access to product and process technology. It will achieve quality and improvement. It will achieve reliability and continuity of supply if you marry procurement and supply chain together. Of course, when you look at what are the activities, you realize, we agree with me as a matter of revision, that one of the activity that is important as a part of strategy in um, supply chain operation, especially when we look at sourcing and supply chain operation, is that you look at the activity that includes supplier appraiser, where you appraise your supplier. You look at the key activity that your supplier does, and you appraise them, and know whether they are okay for you to award your contract to. We have looking at the historical records, all right, of either current or potential supplier, and that will provide an evidence that they have a good track record, and of course, not just having a good track record. It means they have the confidence and the evidence that they can actually do the job very well. Then, of course, product capacity. You want to look at your production capacity, because either potential or existing, what is your capacity to deliver to meet your volume, to meet your quantity. All right. And of course, if they have the capacity, you want to know how sufficient is the resources they have within the environment. Like example, the equipment they are stocked to support production and the rest. All this you want to know as an activity that comes in sourcing, of course, identifying and also developing. Of course, when you talk about activities regarding sourcing, you look at financial capacity. You're checking out the financial capacity. You're looking at organizational issues, their structure, their culture, their ethics. All right, and also importantly, you're looking at um, uh, their etiquette to work. All right. Then of course we look at also another activity, which is the supplier supply chain network. What is their network? It's important for you to establish the network that the supplier uses. All right, to understand where the problem will come from, especially where you are looking at. You can track it down to whether it's second or a third tier supplier, where they are getting their supply for, what is their network of supply. Of course, if it's credible enough and it's a thing, if it's a supply base that will not lose face for the organization, then of course you look at what we call commercial. The commercial, it's actually legal issues relating to maybe partnership, contract. You look at not just you look at also trademarks. You look at patents. You look at all those things when you are looking at getting the supplier. These are activities that are involved in the supplier. Of course, they will look at one other important apart from procurement and sourcing, which is transportation. Transportation that deals actually essentially deals with the movement of goods and service from one point to another. And of course, transportation of goods uh, provides an important link between different component area or functions of the supply chain operations. And of course, um, modern supply chain, for it to be efficient, will need to depend on the effectiveness of transport, all right? Because there are three qualities that are expected from a freight transport for it to actually increase the efficiency of the supply chain. One of them is availability of a transport system, that the transport supply and delivery must be available within a defined time where the customer wants it. And of course, one other one is we look at is reliability. That is, so I mean, the transport system must be dependable, must be reliable, all right? Although we can't guarantee 100% reliability in most cases, but of course, it must be reliable. All right, it must be reliable. So I haven't talked about the reliability of it. You're looking at the responsiveness of course. To supply chain, the logistics supplier must be flexible enough and agile enough to respond to any change in demand within the supply chain. Of course, it now looks at, for you to be responsive, then modern choice will come on board. And of course, modern choice will not depend on other factors that we'll identify in our next slide on whether you want to move in terms of losing responsiveness, reliability, and availability. Of course, when we talk about it, if you look at this chart, it lists the different modes of transport, their strength and their weakness. So this will now determine, influence whether who will choose what. How you want to choose a mode based on the weakness or the strength of most of the mode. Like the road mode has a quality strength to be flexible enough and to be responsive enough to meet door-to-door services. Highly flexible for customer service because it meets the last mile delivery for customer. Then of course, um, it has a weakness of congestion, it has a weakness of delay, it has a weakness of, environmental aspect, of course, and of course, there's a limited amount of weight and volume you can carry when it comes to the land transport. Of course, you have the rail. Rail is efficient in moving bulk transport, bulk product, sorry. It's completed over a long haul, all right, and distance. It's energy efficient. Of course, maybe sometimes it might be cost efficient, but it has one weakness. One of the major weaknesses of it is that it's inflexible because the train will move, or the rail will move on a dedicated track. All right, and of course, because it's move on a dedicated track and it's inflexible, there's a high possibility of double handling of freight while in transit. Then we have also the maritime, the shipping industry, which is actually good in carrying, which is efficient in carrying bulk product, high volume product, high tonnage product over a long haul. And of course, one, like we all know, no matter how advanced the technology of maritime is, it is slow. And of course, because it's maritime, and of course, wherever the goods is needed might be on land, and there will be a case of double handling. Same thing with inland waterways. It's energy efficient, it is cheap, it is slow, there's double handling also. Air owes the superiority of being the fastest of all. The speed, especially when it comes to traveling over a long distance. provides high security for goods while on air, but of course it's very expensive. Like same thing with the road mode. There's a limited weight in the volume that the air transport will carry. So there are actually strategic issues that we as professionals want to look at while we're selecting transport. Some of them we've said it earlier before now. And some of the strategic issues are one, um, you look at um, the characteristics, because you want to look at the issues that will affect you selecting the transport mode within the supply chain. And one of the things you look at is uh, the company characteristics in question, the financial situation of the organization, the supply point of the organization, and of course, um, if they own their own transport system. All right, it's one thing that will affect whether you want to select. Then, of course, one thing again you look at is the market structure of where the organization is sourcing its product from, the product location, the distribution channels, and the product characteristics is another thing again you will look at. Of course, because either this characteristics relates to the volume, the value, the weight, the perishability, special handling, whether it's a dangerous goods or not. Of course, it will affect your selection of transportation. Then, of course, customer characteristics, what your customer wants also another thing, because it identify where your whether the customer can the service level you are trying to provide to them through transport is accessible to them enough. I mean enough. Whether you have to give them a credit rating, all right. The terms of sales are like that, and on and on and on. Of course, in terms of transportation, when I make customer characteristics, some customer will prefer using CIF, some will prefer FOB. Of course, the common of CIF is cost, uh, cost, insurance, and freight to be put while they are transporting their goods. Some will look, okay, let's do FOB free on board, and of course, the goods delivered and you pay. So these are some of the things that you want to look at as strategic issues to transportation, in selecting transportation. Of course, there are key decisions that would influence your transport selections. One of them is the customer's level. In summary, market coverage will be another reason. Then sourcing decisions is another key thing that will affect or influence your selection of transport. Processing and manufacturing is another one. Then pricing will be another key issues that supply chain managers will want to look at. Then we look at key decisions that will also influence your transport also, or in terms of when I mean transportation, is also sometimes you look at the location of your warehouse where you have the location of your warehouse. Now on the chart we have here is showing that if a depot is sited close to a market, then the distribution cost, that's the transportation cost to distribute to the market, will be low. But at the same time, the purchasing and transport costs may be high due to the distance over which the goods needs to be shipped to get to that depot that is close to the market. So the reverse will be the case if the warehouse is situated close to the manufacturing site. Of course, the cost of moving it from the manufacturing site to the warehouse will be reduced, while the cost to distribute to the market will increase. So what do you do as an expert? Now, you see from the chart available here, you see where you have your cost on this side, then the cost of transportation or distribution is on the vertical axis. Then the horizontal, you have the number of warehouse or depot that you want to have. So where you look at where the cost of the cost of your warehouse cost and your cost of transportation meet, it's actually an optimum cost where you need to actually locate your warehouse. That is where your distribution cost and the cost of moving the goods to the warehouse and also managing the goods in the warehouse meet becomes an optimal equilibrium point where you want to situate a warehouse so that you can actually get a balance between the cost of distribution and the cost of trunking to your warehouse. So it becomes a key decision that will influence your warehouse location and how many is located. I mean, where your warehouse location and where it is located matters. Then from there, we look at warehouse as another key important activity within the supply chain. In fact, not just the activity, but components. All right. Imagine this thing I'm talking about is not just activity, you can call it component of the supply chain. Sourcing and procurement, transportation, warehouse are key component of a warehouse. Supply chain management. So what is warehouse? Warehouse sometimes today is a place where goods are kept. And of course, sometimes in today's world, it is referred to as what we call distribution system. All right. It comes in different shapes and sizes. It comes large size, small size, room package size. And that's what it is a point of distribution. It's a distribution center and must be properly managed. All right. And of course, the role of warehouse has been transformed over the years from traditional storage to more commercial role where you see effective movement of goods and services to the end users. All right. Rushing in 2006 identified warehouses and store. I mean, they identified warehouses, stores, and distribution center as integral components and element of supply chain where critical decisions within the element of supply chain needs to met because the decisions have an overall effect in this in the service and cost level within the supply chain. So warehouse cost, whatever cost you, whatever one, I mean, one of the major costing within the supply chain, or one of the major cost center or contribution to cost within the supply chain is the warehouse. All right. So as a warehouse manager, there are a number of factors or issues that you need to consider that will affect either the location of a warehouse, the operation of the warehouse, and the establishment of a warehouse. Of course, you look at one of them is the location of the warehouse. Number two is the market and product based stability. Now, location it means where to locate the product is important. Location of the warehouse is important. The market and product based stability means the kind of goods you want to store in the warehouse. Is the product stable? Is the market stable? Because the market growth and expectation and product trend will influence the kind of decision on the size and the location of the warehouse facility. This is turn we are influenced the level of technology that will be need to be invested in the warehouse facility. If the goods is not a goods that has a long-term market stability, or the product does not have a market stability in product life cycle, you agree with me that the investment in the warehouse will be low. The investment in technology in the warehouse will be low because this is a thing that's not long run but a short run investment because the goods are not stable. Of course, one other factor you want to consider again is the characteristics of goods to be handled. All right, because there are various goods that can be stored in warehouse, and each of the goods have different characteristics. I mean, characteristics such as the size, the weight, all right, the product life cycle, e.g., we talk about the that is the perishability of the product, the value of the product, and etc. can affect how you handle, because this will go a long way to affect how handling of goods and storage of goods in the warehouse is done. Of course, one other factor you want to consider while you actually consider, making trying decision within a warehouse, also the design layout, the design and layout of the warehouse, because a good warehouse should have a good design of flow of goods and services as also while you are designing a warehouse. So, and when you design, this entails that the layout is designed in most careful manner. Of course, either using some of the known form of warehouse design, such as what we call the true flow, like you see in the first diagram, where goods is received, is put away, order comes in, it is picked and straight, it goes out of the door at the back door. All right, or you can have where you don't have proper land to manage, where you have what we call the U flow. The U flow talks about goods coming in, all right, through one section, it is put away. All right, the next door, same, not the back end, but same door. All right, same position, same wing, same north wing or south wing in the warehouse. The goods comes out and goes. Of course, you have this level, and we have the multi-story or cross-functional type of design. All of these depend on the land size or the size of the warehouse. You can actually the design can come true. Then, while we looked at warehouse, let's look at costing. We can't talk about activity of supply chain without looking at the cost of the supply chain, because generally it's accepted that warehousing costs represent between 30 to 40% of the total distribution cost, and this is a large proportion of expenditure within the supply chain. And this cost vary from location to location, but the main cost drivers within the warehouse is labor. You look at rental, you look at building maintenance services, you look at equipment costs. All right, these are some of the major costs that you see. Of course, when you talk about labor in the total cost of the event will take about 50% of the total cost of warehouse. When you take about labor costs, you're paying staff salaries, you're paying allowances and the rest. All these come to form part of the cost. Then, of course, I haven't seen some of the major component activities of supply chain: transportation, procurement, warehouse. Let's look at the logistic approach as a key activity within the supply chain. All right. So, like earlier, we've actually noted that organization tends to function within layers and functional silos that create some barriers and boundaries likely to affect customer service level. Now, the priority of a supply chain management is putting the customer at the center of all the chain activities, and this entails all activities across the organization and the supply chain with the overall objective of speedy delivery of product and service to the customer. So a common logistic approach is actually vital because it achieves a flowing pipeline that requires an orientation that the facilities end-to-end process are being managed properly. So the characteristics of logistics approach will be organizing operations around process and not task. All right, so we can have a flat layer structure building upon a multifunctional team. All right, working together to include, to increase their performance management based on what the market is expecting. So that's what we're looking at the logistic approach for. So the purpose of logistic approach is to create a smooth flowing pipeline. All right, and in creating that, organization must be seen to have a flat structure that encourage teams working together, limiting the barriers and boundaries that can be found in any organization that can affect customer service level. So, so there are different activities, and the activities within the organization will need to be integrated properly and managed properly so that everything will work flow. So logistics can become a vehicle for change within the supply chain in the following way: one, integration of information system; two, supply base is rationalized using logistic approach. Then early supply involvement is in the centralization of inventory. All right, this is when you bring logistic in within the supply chain activity because it becomes a vehicle for change, and these are the changes you will see: centralization of inventory, supplier managed, supply base rationalization, and the rest. So you can look at logistic approach without looking at the costing of costing the supply chain activity. What are the costs of supply chain activity? I think 2004 stated that every organization forms part of a larger value stream that links suppliers with production and consumers. So as a manager, it becomes important to understand that your costs will become value creator to your customer or consumers of products and services. So it is therefore important to control and contain some of your operational costs through appropriate management techniques. Equally important is for your partners to understand, your partners in the supply chain, in the chain, to implement some of these cost control techniques that will ensure at least the cost of supply chain is low. So supply chain costs can accrue from either time or activity undertaken during the flow of goods within the pipeline. And the cost can be broken into two. We can have a time-based costing and activity-based costing. Now, the time-based costing is actually the fixed cost, and the activity-based costing are actually variable cost. Variable cost in the sense that the cost comes in accrue as the activity within the supply chain increases. But time-based is fixed. But over time, when the asset becomes depreciated, it can become variable when the cost of changing it. So, talking about supply chain costing areas, there are various areas within the supply chain that requires savings. There are costing areas, and those costs will require proper way to limit, reduce costs so they can have good savings. An example we include the business process. All right, these are example of costs. You have a procurement cost, you have production cost, you have distribution cost, you have inventory and carrying cost. And of course, if we start to unwrap the onions of each of these costs, there are different costs. Example, like if you look at the inventory carrying cost, there are different costs that comes in there. Like we mentioned earlier, labor cost, rent cost, insurance cost, different costs that are seen there. Distribution costs these are telling you fleet management and the rest. These are examples of costs. And of course, all those costing area needs to be looked at. And of course, where there's a need to reduce cost to encourage savings, that is done, all right, appropriately. Then, of course, we want to talk about costing and managing costing activities. There's what we call activity-based costing. Remember, we said activity costs are variable costs. These are costs that comes along as a result of the processes that takes place within the supply chain. So Activity-based cost enables the exact cost of product or service to be ascertained, all right, by allocating cost to activities rather than to function. So it is very possible to identify the true cost involved in delivering of product or service. So traditionally, the activity-based costing has to be confined to a functional boundary within an organization. But recently, it's this approach has been extended beyond those boundaries that have been confined to the function they have maybe to the accounting department, but it has gone beyond that boundaries as a result of coordination and cooperation between organization and their partners in giving us the supply chain the right information for everybody within the chain to manage. Then we look at the activity-based costing can have two major component parts. All right, can have value-added activities, value-added activity, and non-value-added activity. Of course, like we know, anything value-added, we look at increasing the worth of your product. We look at the activities are seen as activities that the customer are willing to pay for. Then, of course, the non-value activity increases the time you spend, but not what, all right, the product. That's the opposite of value added. Then, of course, the question is, will customer be able to pay for those activity? No, maybe the customer will not be willing to pay for the activity. So you must understand the kind of costing, the type of costing, which either value added cost or non-value added cost. But at the end of the day, whatever cost you want to accrue should be a value added cost rather than having a non-value added costing within your organization. So ABC also provides one of the thing about importance of ABC or the activity-based costing is that it provide opportunity for managers or organizations to use to identify cost drivers, all right, and also identify cost reduction areas, and also use as an instrument to measure cost more accurately. Then, if you want to implement ABC, that's activity-based costing, the implementation of the activity ABC for supply chain management can be broken down into the following step one. Step one, you select the right team that will look at the entire activities within the organization where you are expected to add cost. Then step two, you analyze the supply chain functions within your organization. Then step three, you break down the process into activities, each of the functions like we identified earlier. Remember when we look at this area, like we talk about production, costing, we talk about distribution costing, we talk about inventory carrying cost, inventory carrying cost. All those could be functions that can be broken down into activities. And of course, you identify the resources consumed in performing those activities. Then you determine, you step six, you look at step five, you look at determining the cost of the activities. And step six, you look at tracking the cost, all right, of these activities. And seven, you analyze your final analyze everything to get a good result or orientation, whether you've been accruing cost or not. All right. So of course we have other factors, other thing. This, direct profitability, product profitability is also another tool that can be used to analyze the activities within the supply chain, because this approach is extensively applied within a retail environment, because it enables you to break down the different costs or wants or need of your customer. All right, because the concept recognizes that certain customer needs or requirements may vary, and of course, and increase the cost, as we can see in our ABC model. So when this happens, the profitability of this particular customer or product cycle can be reduced. Can be used to can be reduced or even eliminated. So as a manager, it is necessary to understand this aspect and be able to apply your direct product profitability for those products whose profitability may be questionable. Of course, like we say, Pareto ABC, some products you might have within your organization are not selling, but of course, it's a cost-adding activity to your organization. So if you can understand the profitability of each of the product as per demanded by the customer, you will understand where you can actually want to reduce costs or transfer the cost of holding such a product, or managing such a service within your organization. So DPP is a good approach that you can use to look the costing activity. All right. Why do we need why do you think we need a total cost organization. All right. You know, everything you buy, because when you buy something, you purchase at a price, you buy at a price, and that price is charged, and you pay for what that thing you are buying for. Same, your customer pay for that service. So there's a need for you to understand what is the total cost of me owning this product. All right, like I talked, the total costing of me owning this product. For example, you're buying a car. Now, the car might come, you might buy a car 3 million naira, but that is not the total cost of you owning that car. Now, that car you are buying the 3 million at 3 million is the cost of purchasing. But of course, the other thing, like the life cycle, the life cycle cost, you talk about the cost of maintenance, you look at the cost of repair, you look at the cost of fueling. All those are costs that will come in at the long run. All right. So, and of course, the cost of disposal is also taken into factor as the total cost concept. All right, because the concept of total cost concept is developed to ensure that all costs associated with the ownership of a particular product and service is included in the calculation to give when you are buying a product. And when you're buying it, it gives you the true picture of that thing you are buying. Like I used to say, for example, a car costs 3 million naira, another car costs 5 million naira. Now, the car that costs 3 million naira might be cheap at the purchase price, but of course, that car might be difficult to maintain. For instance, let's assume every month it requires you to use nothing less than 50,000 to maintain the car, in terms of changing plugs, in terms of changing engine oil, in terms of all those things. So imagine you spending 50,000 every month. In a year, that will come down to about 500,000 in maintenance alone. Now, if the car that's about 2.5, so if the car is going to last maybe the next 5 years, you know how much you've maintained, that have gone into that car. All right. And this, you need to understand that, take that total cost concept into your picture, so that when you're giving the true picture of what a particular product costs or a particular service costs, you can actually say this is what it costs for us to own this service. So the total cost of ownership will cover your acquisition cost, which is your buying cost, your ownership cost that includes the risk associated with the ownership of you. All right, the need to maintain inventory, the life cycle cost, all right, which is like the maintenance cost. They talk about the post-ownership cost, that is the disposal of that same product. All right, the cost to service, the cost to dispose, the warranty, and all sorts of that. Those are what the total cost of ownership cost. Then, of course, we have target costing to measure the cost of supply chain activity. All right, this is another approach that organization anticipate a competitive selling price, then they define their profit margin according to their desired profitability level and cost of incurring the process. So, unlike the traditional cost plus approach, where you put this is the cost of me doing it, then you put a little margin on it. That's the cost plus approach. The target costing takes a top-down approach, whereby once the market expectation has been established, the next stage is then to identify what can be termed allowable costs. Now, this will then lead to a target cost for the entire process or product. Thus, cost reduction measures identified within these targets throughout the process. All right, because from inception, you've asked yourself, what is the allowable cost? What is the allowable cost that we are allowed to spend? What is the budget we're allowed to spend based on the expectation of the market? Because, of course, before then, you have done a market survey. How much is the market? How much is the customer willing to buy or pay for this product or this process? Now, after you've known that, then you ask yourself, stop. If this is known, how much are we going to expend? Because this is the amount of profit we're expecting to get if we go to the market. Because rather than adding this is my cost, then of course I'm putting a margin plus. Then because that in tandem is what we call a push approach rather than a pull approach. A push approach is the fact that you just make the product without inquiring and you just push it to the market at a markup price that market will buy. All right, but the target costing is saying no, we are pulling it into the market. We have gotten a perception, of doing a research to understand how much the market is willing to buy our product. Then, if they are willing to buy a product at this price, at least at 100 naira, what is our level cost if we're going into production? So that is what target costing takes into account in the approach to management. So, of course, after looking at costing of supply chain and supply chain activity, We will talk about the performance management, and of course, performance measurement within the supply chain, because the supply chain management is about the flow of goods and services, all right, revenues and information, and also the flow of revenue and also the flow of information throughout the pipeline of the supply chain, and the benefit that can only be, derived if every partners within this, the chain cooperate in a integrative manner. So performance management is now recognized as a business critical function that allows companies to proactively monitor, manage, and improve the efficiency of their day-to-day operations. And also being able to identify and understand, not just they have the ability to identify, also understand, act, and validate performance improvement. All right. So also companies will be better equipped to keep down costs and respond to increased market demand when the economy recovers. And also, it's imperative that the system of measuring performance is applied throughout the pipeline, all right, in order for us to evaluate the performance of the supply chain itself. So it is important, it is critical to have a continuous performance measurement or evaluation method in the organization. So performance evaluation, like if you're managing performance, you're doing performance management, is always you're also doing performance evaluation. And performance evaluation is defined as a quantitative and a qualitative assessment of a function or activity of a given period towards the achievement of strategic and operational goal and objective. What we are saying is that in performance management, performance evaluation is using both quantitative, all right, what is known, what is written, qualitative numbers, all right, between a scale of 1 to 10, how do you see we have performed, all right, to assess a function, either your distribution, either your inventory, either your warehouse, either your accounting, either your selling function. You are actually critically assessing those activity, all right. And when you're assessing the activity, it means there's a period you are looking at, given a period that giving your KPI that would have achieved this achievement strategically, and also get our goals into our pocket. So that is what performance evaluation is. And in evaluating anything, there's what we call the concept of key performance indicators, KPI. And what are KPI? KPI indicators are expressions of abstract supply chain objectives in financial terms, or in other of physical units for the purpose of comparison. All right. So the process of KPI is for data. Is a data-driven activity that is related to various functions, to various processes or activities to be assembled, quantified, and transformed into physical or financial information that can be used to compare results, often against what you have benchmarked. So in identifying relevant KPIs measure. So to excuse me, somebody's up my line. So like we said, it must be noted that performance cannot always be, point to the root of the problem, but the key performance objective and the key performance drivers should be identified as a control and the overall behavior performance. So as a supply chain manager, performance measurement must be looked against KPI will indicate that um, you might get a way to adjust your key performance objectives, and also what input you can put in your key performance drivers that needs to be done. So KPI is a data-driven target that must be avoided. That must be set against what a benchmark process. Must be compared against what is benchmark and information that is benchmark already. And of course, in doing that, you must get to understand what are my key performance objectives, all right, in developing a key performance indicator, and what are my key performance drivers, what drives your performance, what are my objectives. And if you can get to understand that as a supply chain manager, all right, you will know how to strategically adjust your objectives as you move within the process, and also understand what is needed to drive your objective based on what has been identified. So, performance in planning your KPI, the what we call a control cycle. It has 7 steps that we need to use in planning and controlling KPI. Of course, you understand, you're not just creating it, it's a cycle that needs to be monitored over again. All right. And one of the things that you do when you are creating a KPI, a planning and controlling cycle, first you need to identify your objective while you are creating your indicators. Then you identify your potential strategies in achieving those objectives. Then evaluate your strategies. Then you choose the best alternate course of action. Then you implement you find a way to implement the long-term strategic plan. Then you measure against you measure actual results against maybe daily, weekly, monthly, as against your compare with your plan. Then lastly, you respond to divergence from the plan in case there are things diverting your attention after you've implemented. So you realize that from the step 1 to step 5 represents your planning process. The last 2 steps are confined to control and evaluation and managing the entire process. So the use of the cycle on a regular basis, maybe weekly, monthly, daily, will help organization, our senior management, determine areas of performance which they need to either extend or make better. So, sorry. Sorry. So, we have types of indicators, but originally, performance management have been focused on conventional methods of financial report and outcome, and these measures will look at the bottom line in terms of the cost of revenue and the return on capital employment. So strategic supply chain performance is focused on 2 critical points within the point of customer and competition. And the key performance will be shown in our next slide to see what customers are looking for as how you can boost performance. But of course, it is based on cost of the product, the speed the product gets to them, quality of the product, the reliability of your service, and the flexibility of your service. That is what customer is looking for. But it's a slight departure from the traditional method of how we manage performance. All right, which is basically looking at the financial record. How much was invested? How much did we get? All right, what's our revenue from this investment? But there's a departure. So definitely you can look at financial. You can look at financial performance indicator, which are types. Basically, then you have non financial performance indicator, where we look at drivers like cost, speed, quality, reliability, and flexibility. Then from there, we look at key performance area. Now, this key performance area, like I'll give an example. We'll talk about the cost of delivery. Cost, you look at the delivery cost, you look at the budget cost, look at revenue. And when you look at delivery, you are looking at the production delivery time, you are looking at delivery lead time, you look at throughput time, you look at time you get to the market. We look at, when you talk about quality, we are looking at the percentage of defects, the number of customer complaint, and these are things customers are looking at checking out. Then you talk about reliability, you're looking at the percentage of order in time you get out of your shop. You look at percentage of orders completed, you look at percentage of order you're responding to them. When you talk about flexibility, you are looking at time to change capacity, you're looking at your setup cost, you look at your the time to change schedules. Of course, then lastly, you look at health and safety and environment. It matters a lot to customer if you're doing well in the area of emission, in terms of waste disposal, in terms of your recycling. So these are key performance areas that other people looking at there, you want to send indicators for within supply chain. Non-financial performance, measures. Then let's look at the concept of cross-functional performance model. You see, supply chain have been struggling to come up with performance measures that satisfy all stakeholders. And this is because there's a good range of supply chain objectives, and each of these each of these organizations has more than one stakeholders that they need to satisfy. An example of stakeholders we're talking about are your shareholders, your employees, your customers, your suppliers, your community, the community where your business is working around, government, and even NGOs. All right, all these are people that you need to satisfy. So there's a need for you to have a cross-functional performance model set on, but not just looking at just customer alone, but everybody you want to look at, that have will determine or have effect on how your business is run or not. And of course, one of the things people look at these days in managing most of these things is using an instrument called the balance scorecard. Now, balance scorecard was developed by Kaplan and Norton in the 1990s, and they have described this innovation as follow that balance scorecard retains financial measures, but the financial measures tell the story of the past event, and these financial measures may not be adequate for guiding and evaluating on the overall performance of the organization. So, cross-functional measures attempt to link strategic thinking to achieve desired results. And balance scorecard is therefore a vehicle to communicate strategic direction and compare these with actual performance. So, in addition to linking strategic objective with actual progress, balance scorecard uses organization-wide measures that can be tailored to suit particular strategic business units within the supply chain, as you will see within the next slide. Now, you will see some example of business units like looking at balancing financials, linking customers, linking learning and growth of the organization with the internal process, setting objectives, setting measures, setting targets and actuals on all these four basic components of balance scorecard that will give a full balance of what the organization is and what the organization hopes to achieve in the future. Then, of course, in measurement, you look at the balance scorecard also have the following benefit, especially what we call non-financial measures to organization. And the benefits are one, your organization will gain strategic control of your operations. There's always the adequate communication within all the strategic business units about the contents of their work. There are opportunities for IT use linking customer relationship within the competence needs. There's also opportunities for learning through this systematic approach to data collection. There's also critical success factor that can easily be identified and discussed within the with all concerned within the supply chain. The balance scorecard provides long-time dimension to performance measurements. All right. From there, we'll look at approaches to performance measurement. Of course, we have financial measures. We've identified that, and financial measures are important, but may be adequate in assessing and evaluating the performance of organization against its competition, of course. And the weakness of using financial measures alone are, if you're using that as measurement, is that it's historical in nature, like we said, is in the past. It does not link to customer service and other key strategic business units. It may be difficult to other operational factors along the supply chain. Of course, when you look at the approaches, the best approach you can actually use for performance measurement is using what we call a current approach. And when we talk about the current approach, you look at current approach now. It's looking at what is current in terms of margin, like we say in the balance scorecard, what the customer needs, the consumer wants, your competitors are doing, you're merging them together, you're linking them together. All those challenges are held together, are put together to come up with a good measure to ask yourself, at the end of the day, are we doing well against our competitor? At the end of the day, are we doing well to our customers and our consumers overall? So if you look at the next slide, this slide, it shows you what we talk about the current approach regarding customer, and also the next slide we look at competitor. Now, in the eyes of your customer, you're asking yourself, we're measuring in a scale of 1 to 10, or strong, medium, or weak. Other winners, are others winning in the eyes of our customer? All right. Strong means you have a critical advantage. Medium means you have an important advantage. All right. We're looking at, based on that, you can know whether you have critical advantage, important advantage, and useful advantage. Based in using either you're strong, you're medium, you're weak. Then you're looking at other qualifiers Our orders are they actually meeting the use of our customer? All right, in terms of orders, are they high in the industry standard? Are they average industry standard? Uh, are they approaching the industry standard? Then you have maybe less important things you look at, like not useful and the rest. So these are some of the things you can ask yourself in this regard. Set up questionnaires, ask your customers, see if you can fill it up, and ask yourself if you're doing well in your own site. And of course, you can have from the in the competition, in evaluating your performance against your competition, you can ask questions like, better, are you better than your competition? All right, better, much better, marginally better than your competition. Them, are you same as your competition in terms of maybe you're sometimes marginally better, you're nearly marginally better, you're slightly, lower better. All right, or are you worse than your competition? Of course, usually marginally worse than the rest. You can ask yourself these kind of beautiful questions to know if you are doing well in measuring your performance within the supply chain. So examples of measures, performance measures will include, but especially some customer service performance measures will include your order cycle time. You want to measure against, ask question against order cycle time to your customer, delivery and reliability to your customer, frequency of your delivery to your customer, stock availability and quality to your customer, documentation quality to your customer, order competency to your customer, technical support to your customer, and also how you handle good returns to your customer. So you can measure against that. Of course, from there we move down to what we call benchmarking. All right, benchmarking. So when we talk about benchmarking is actually a process of you continuously measuring and comparing your business performance against a comparable process in leading organization to obtain information that will help your organization identify and implement improvement. This is Benson's definition in 1993 about benchmarking, because performance measurement will have meaning only if it's compared or related to some kind of standard. So benchmarking is a continuous process of measuring product and service and business practices against the toughest competitor and those companies recognized that you could recognize as leaders within your industry. So when we talk about benchmarking, you look at benchmarking, in practicing benchmarking, there's a need for you to understand that there's concept of planning. All right, identify what to benchmark, identify who to benchmark against, determine the data collection methods, all right, and how you collect your data. Then, of course, once the data is collected, there's a concept of what? Analysis, determine the current performance gap, project your future performance level in the concept of when you're analyzing what you've gotten after you've done your benchmarking. Then, of course, integration comes in the next step as you communicate your benchmark finding, you gain acceptance from your stakeholders, you establish a functional goal. When you establish integrity, then you take actions. All right, in actions, you develop action plans, you implement specific actions, you calculate your benchmark. All right, then the maturity, you show leadership. All right, leadership position is attained, then you fully integrate the practice into your process and into your own organization. This is actually the entire process of benchmarking. Of course, in benchmarking, we have types of benchmarking. There are different types of benchmarking. This will come against the situation that the organization find themselves. We have what we call data benchmarking. This involves numerical comparison of your organization performance in some key areas. We have process benchmarking. This involves comparing specific process against similar process within your organization. You have functional benchmarking, and functional benchmarking involves comparing performance in one function with another function with the same organization or outside your organization. All right. You have what we call internal benchmarking. This involves comparing different functions of your process within. Involve comparing different functions of your process within the same organization in order to bring this to same performance. Internal benchmarking, you can start to compare. If you realize that accounting is doing well, all right, as against procurement department, you can compare what are accounting department doing well that procurement are not doing well. That's internal. Then when we talk about functional benchmarking, you can try to say, okay, I want to compare an accounting function in my organization with another accounting function with another organization, not necessarily the same industry, to see what they are doing well. All right, these are some of the things you can look at. Then you also have what we call is it the best in class benchmarking? No, the industry benchmarking, where in organization you compare yourself with other organizations in the same industry. All right, and this gives you an organizational overview of current performance against the outside world as they do. So we have what we call competitive benchmarking. This occurs when an organization compares its performance against its own competitors. But this is not without its own problem, because no competitor will want to give out its trade secret. And what we call best in class benchmarking, this type of benchmarking is looking at comparing an organization against those other organizations that are deemed to be doing well or performing well across all industries, and need to see, okay, what these guys are. They not necessarily they must be in the industry, but they are seen to be best in their own industry. So if you do benchmarking, what are the expected outcomes for benchmarking? All right. Some of the expected outcomes to benchmarking include understanding competition and becoming competitive, obtaining and working towards a best practice, obtaining many options for comparison when you're benchmarking, understanding the market reality, and find a way to establish effective goals and objectives. Then objective, you do our outcome is get an objective evaluation of performance and true measures of your productivity, and proactively get a proactivity and problem solving. Then understand the output based on industry best practice. So as with comparative exercise, it is important to ensure that you are comparing likes with likes, otherwise the result may be distorted. You are comparing rice with rice and beans with beans, so to get the good results you want. Then of course, that is that for measurement and performance measurement within the supply chain. And now, in order for us to understand supply chain, look at the market. All right, and of course, I know in supply PDO1 we discussed marketing, but I'll just glide through what marketing mix all about. Marketing mix is one of the most famous marketing terms, and marketing mix is actually a tactical or operational part of every marketing plan. And marketing mix is also called the 4 P's of marketing. And right now we are calling it's called the 7 P's of marketing, where we have price, place, product, promotion. These are the original 4 P's. Then of course, the service, the other ones introduced are called the service marketing, which include process, people, physical evidence. Of course, price, like if you look at price, is actually the amount the consumer is willing to exchange for offering that service you're doing. So it's important that the right price will be there. And if you look at PD1, we have different type of price. Price can come at different form, depends on the kind of product you are doing. Either you are doing an original product, or you are imitating the product, or you are adapting the product. Of course, you have place, and place includes yeah, right, the company where the company activity takes place. Now, and of course, where the product is being sold, and the question is it affordable? Is it accessible to customers for them to come and access that service? Then you have what we call product. Like I said, there are different type of product earlier on. You can have imitative product, you can have original product, you can have an adaptive product. So product means the goods and service combinations offers that you are willing to offer to the market. So for many, a product is simply a tangible physical items and that they are willing to buy or sell. All right. So as you have product that are tangible, you have intangible product, which are services in nature. Then you have promotion. Promotion is actually advertisement, all right, which include activity that includes you informing consumer, informing potential customer about your product and changes in your product and how good your product is in the market. So these are some examples of marketing mix. Of course, then we have what we call market segmentation. Segmentation of market is carried out to ensure that, I mean, most of our segmentation is about dividing the market into different groups, all right, varying groups or niches. All right, so segmentation of market is carried out to ensure the product or service are targeted to the right customer rather than to all customer. Just as you have 4 P's identifies how marketing process should be undertaken, market segmentation divides the potential market into distinct subset of consumers in order to identify to whom the marketing should be directed on the basis of, and also whom, the who, and all the rest, the W's, the whom, the why. All right. So of course, you look at the basis of big geographical information. Where do customer come from? That's the segmentation of the market. Demographic information. What are the age, gender, race, and density of our customer? Sociology information will be who exactly are our customer. Economic information is how much disposable income tax that our customer has, I mean, after tax, are willing to spend on our product. So Much of this information is gathered through research, market research by specialists from helping you spread questionnaires, do market survey, do market intelligence data, and customer response survey. And as with this data is analyzed, and of course, you can actually know what to do. And with that, we come to an end of today's class of chapter 3 of supply chain management, supply chain operations and activity. I hope this course we've done under 1 hour 5 minutes, you've been able to learn more. Please practice. Very soon we'll be releasing past questions for you to, assess your learning gap, and from there we can move forward to our exams coming up soon. So thank you for listening, and please we will endeavor to go back again to this course through using past question and answer very soon. So thank you very much, and have yourself a good night rest. Bye-bye.